This final one that we're going to look at is University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I don't know if there were folks here on the call that attended Madison's presentation this morning. They actually featured this HEERF-II form. I'm actually going to show a recorded demonstration of how that form responds and what it looks like. This was created to allow for students to request emergency release funds that were initiated or approved by one of the follow-up acts to the CARES Act. And it was, the really cool thing about this form is that the university decided that they needed to build something on February 8th. They spent 1 week designing, developing, testing, and deploying this form, and it went live on February 15th. It cut processing time in half compared to the process that they originally rolled out for a similar CARES funding request last year. So it's a very efficient form. They were able to make it in a fraction of the time. So 1 week from initiation to go live on this particular form. 75 to 80% of it is configuration. So very little development required. Some of that technical work did require or was involved in creating views for part of that form build. At this point, there are no CIs or workflow involved in this version of the form. But the nice thing about GTE forms with the one that UW-Madison built is a good example. They can go ahead and extend that and just continue to enhance it going forward. So if there are changes they want to make to it, they can go ahead and introduce those changes and roll those up to production. So the next time somebody uses this form, it's just easier and faster to use. There's a query that runs and downloads data from the form. Thousands have been submitted just over the last few weeks since the form went live on February 15th. And as I mentioned, the form will end up being repurposed to become a standard emergency request form, adding CI, workflow, and additional logic to manage the behavior of the form.
Just want to throw in that HEERF is the funniest word I've heard all day.
I know, and I keep looking at it wanting to say HEERF, but it's much easier to say HEERF, and it sounds like a herd of something. So maybe it's a herd of students. So this is what the form looks like. Oh, Paul, I like your little Alt-P recommendation. But I'm going to go ahead and back up here. So again, really good example of being able to incorporate instructional text. That's a big thing to keep in mind when you're evaluating your tool. Does it give you that flexibility to incorporate richly formatted text to provide instruction to the user? So here we
I'd also mention in addition to providing that instructional text, you have the question of who's going to maintain it. And the nice thing, it's a lot easier to maintain it in a configuration-based tool. It's one of the challenges with custom fluid development. You can make it look however you want, but it's often ends up leaving the developer maintaining the text when the users need to change it.
That's a great point. Yeah, so that text is formatted by a functional analyst. They can go ahead and change those instructions, change the hyperlinks. They can go ahead and add fields, change segments, add new rules and logic to the form, workflow routing, all those things are very flexible. So here we see a very good example also of additional data that's being pre-populated within that form. That's all configuration based. There's no technical development required to allow for a form to pre-populate. We're going to go ahead and scroll down. We've got a number of fields here that the student can go ahead and respond to, listing money for certain kinds of expenses. One of the rules that UW incorporated into this form is for any requests up to $500, they don't require additional justification. But once you exceed that $500 threshold, you're going to see a segment open up down below that requires additional, or actually another field that requires additional justification. So here's a large text field that they can go ahead and provide additional details on. Below, we're presented with a series of questions asking us to rank financial hardship requirements. So we're only allowed to respond to one of those selections affirmatively. Once I click yes on any one of these three in financial hardship statement 1, the other ones automatically default to no. That also is a really cool behavior within GTE forms. We're going to go ahead and walk through each one of these. Another thing that's happening behind the scenes inside the smarts of the form is that those scores, those responses, are scored then as severity levels. So the bottom one might receive just a score of 1, the least amount of hardship, all the way up to 3. So now I've selected the number 2 level of severity, and that's going to go ahead and get recorded as part of the form data and calculated for an overall severity score for this particular student's hardships. We also have a conditional segment above there that's showing any loans that they had previously declined but were approved for. It allows for them to essentially reactivate those loans that they had declined before, and UW will determine whether or not they're still eligible and then allow them to release those funds for the loans. We'll go ahead and authorize this and submit it. So a lot of things happening behind the scenes on this particular form, a lot of action, a lot of logic being executed. Here, it realized that we had not provided the additional justification for that increased loan amount. So we have to go ahead and respond with some text in that field, and then we can go ahead and submit. And then this is the form data that was gathered for each one of the students' responses. So this is all consolidated into a spreadsheet, obviously, but it shows you how all of that data can be managed then and reported on for each one of the responses provided for the student or by the student. As we scroll over to the right, we're also going to see the severity scores that didn't show up on the form, but they were being calculated behind the scenes and incorporated in hidden fields on that form, so that when the data was queried, it could go ahead and report on those hidden fields and capture the severity values for each of those. I love this form. A lot of really cool, powerful functionality that you don't recognize, and it just makes that process easier for the user and certainly easier for the university.